maybe I start with just a little bit with a backstory, and just a little bit about myself first. So I'm Raul, born in Estonia. Studied actually. I'm not actually like a tech person in a sense that I studied political science and economics, and later I graduated actually master's program in Japan. I was at the university from in international relations, and but I didn't stay in Japan. I actually went back to Estonia. I worked for Estonian government, for Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, basically being in charge of the various strategies that the fields that Ministry was covering. So basically everything from maritime policy, energy policy, entrepreneurship policy, digital agency, digital policy, and so on. That was quite interesting time. And I was also part of the supervisory team of a national carrier in the Estonian air at one point. But my own what I was always feeling was that Estonia as a country should do more things with Japan. And I actually wrote kind of Asia strategy for the country, which was adopted by the government in 2012. But what I was able to see is that there are no real companies going to Asian countries from Estonia. I mean, the main target was still going to European countries, European markets. So I was okay, if nobody's going, I cannot support anybody, so I have to do it by myself. So I kind of quit my government job and started the company and came to Japan. Kind of helped that my wife was Japanese, so I could basically come here and didn't really need to show any proof that I'm actually working in Japan. Which was actually kind of also interesting because for the first few years, I didn't have any income in Japan. I was charging my clients to my Estonian company, and I did have a Japanese bank account, but I didn't really have actual income in Japan. So when I was extending my stay, at one point people were like, at the immigration office, they asked me like, "Hey, like, do you have any money?" I'm like, "Where did you get money?" I'm like, "From ATMs." Because I could actually take like a printout from my Estonian bank. I could actually print out ATM records to show them that yes, actually I took out enough money. But yeah, so maybe that's the reason why I've been really also not really acceptable for Japanese banks, because I'm still using my Estonian credit cards, and Japanese banks have been kind of rejecting me all over, like every time when I kind of apply for one. But yeah, so like also done a couple of other businesses. So like 2013, started out with like craft beverages import business, so selling Japanese sake and craft beer in Europe, and also was co-founder of a cybersecurity company like Planet, which was kind of like a roller coaster. So we raised a lot of money, but at the end, like right now, the company still works, but it's not really hasn't been actually a success. So like 2 years ago, I separated and started actually something on my own. So that's kick on. And yeah, so actually I'm also an author. So if you look at the katakana in Amazon, you can actually find my book about Estonian e-government. So coming to the company, so basically it's founded 2 years ago, and it's interesting setup because we have a mother company in Estonia. So partly it was that actually Estonian company is really easy to set up, and we were in the beginning, we didn't really have any investments yet, but actually having a company is important. So we were just setting up a Estonian company, and already we were able to participate in different startup competitions and so on. Although actually the Estonian company doesn't really take much resources to keep. Let's put it this way. So, and we only created Japanese kind of subsidiary once we already started building stuff and when we had the financing figured out, which was also in 2021, but a little bit later. So in Tokyo Financial Award, we actually participated as a company from Estonia. And we set up the Japanese daughter company during that time. And it's, from my side, like I know they got problems in Japanese banking as a foreigner, so basically being not unbanked, but quite severely underbanked in a sense that there is just no trust extended to us from the Japanese financial institutions. But so I know market pain, and I know basically, also kind of business development side in Japan. But I need to do this. Like I go to like details a little bit more, like what was maybe some practical push for us to do it. But I needed to find people actually who know how to do it. So I was able to find a guy from Estonia, like Raul. He was a former Wiser, so like working at TransferWise, and actually I know him from that time when he was bringing TransferWise to Japan, maybe like 5-6 years ago. So he was part of that team. And also like Yoshi, so he's basically, he was living Japanese dream, working for, like, a graduate of Tokyo University, working for the largest bank in Japan, but he was also a new business guy, and basically Japanese large banks are very conservative, so most of his kind of plans, what he came up with, were not actually implemented. But with having those guys like as co-founders, like I was able to basically understand, okay, we can build a product, and also we are able to navigate the kind of banking regulation in Japan, which is really hard, actually, especially when you come from outside of Japan. But first, maybe I jump back a little bit, like there's more background. So, like, why like a guy from Estonia thinks that he can actually make like a new level banking app in Japan. So, Estonia, we've known about e-government. So this one is like Digital Public Services Index, and I think already like Estonia for several years has been kind of ranked first in the European Union based on that. So we are kind of IT or digital country. And what it means is that in reality, like if you talk about government services, then there is only one service in Estonia which cannot be done online. It used to be 3, but now it's only 1. And any guesses what it could be? Before it was 3, it was first like selling and buying real estate was not possible online. Second one was that getting married was not possible, but this is actually now possible because the regulation was changed a little bit. So, but getting divorced is still not yet possible. So I think it's not really like technical reasons, but maybe more philosophical reasons why you shouldn't be able to do that online. But everything else you can do online. And it's basically we have this universal ID for individuals, which is similar to Japanese My Number and system. And actually, Japanese government was really looking at Estonia as a reference when implementing this model. And we do have this trusted data exchange for organizations. That means different organizations can exchange sensitive data online securely. Meaning, and it's like, because it's exchanged online, not the word like a secure line or anything else, then it's actually also cheap. And what's important here is that from the beginning, actually, private sector and government sector has been connected. And so it means that actually in Estonia's banking sector, like they were actually really much interested that government would keep up this kind of ecosystem, providing secure ID for bank logins, for example, already since more than 20 years ago for Estonia. And also local banks participated in general IT literacy development programs the country had. So in this sense, this is not really just government initiative, but it's actually like kind of government plus private companies. Whereas in Japan, with My Number, private companies are not allowed to use it at the moment, which is kind of for me doesn't make any sense because I mean, how many times average person is using government services? 2, 3 times. How many like average person is using banking services? Like pretty much every week you kind of log into your like bank account. So, and if you use the same infrastructure to do that, like in Estonian case, government provided infrastructure, then people are quite used with doing that, and there is like no friction really. Whereas in Japan, it's like, it's My Number, like what's it good for? Which is true because it's very limited usability at the moment still. And but yeah, so basically in Estonia, it's always this kind of focus on efficiency. So we basically digital signatures, which we've had for 20 years. On average, it saves us 2% of GDP every year. Lots of red tape. Like in Estonia, I don't really remember when I actually had to sign things on paper. Like even for say like a Giga, like when we opened the Estonian bank account for the company, I was in Japan when I was doing that. Everything was basically like possible online. I created the company while I was in Japan because it was kind of COVID also, and it was difficult to travel. And yeah, so it's basically this efficiency has been very much in the focus. And in a way, what it allows is that if you go to a different country, you see inefficiencies and you see you have seen the future in a way that, okay, you know it's actually like doing things differently is possible. And then it's okay, like why it's not been done yet. So coming from Estonia, I think e-government itself doesn't really mean that people become entrepreneurial, but it means that people actually experience something that they cannot experience in other countries. So it's kind of easier to spot maybe things that need to be solved. And so what we have is like everybody of you can actually become also Estonian e-resident. So that's kind of a virtual citizen. Just apply online and pick it up later from a passport center, I think, in Japan. So we have close to 100,000 people already doing that. The benefit is that you can actually create a Estonian company online. And but yeah, so also but Estonia is also quite recently quite a lot of startups are coming from Estonia. So this is basically data from last year about startups per capita by country. So in Estonia we have more than, I think it looks like 180 startups per 1 million people, and European average is maybe like half of that. So it's quite entrepreneurial, and also quite many companies. Like when you look at actually like investments going to Estonia, it's a small country, like 1.3 million people only. But again, we have more than 3% of GDP is invested into high-tech companies at the moment. So this is you could say it's kind of like a startup boom, but it's actually like virtuous circle. So it didn't start like this; it took time, but kind of accumulated experience created new waves of entrepreneurs. And when it comes to FinTech, then actually Estonian kind of FinTech knowledge started already in 1990s with Hansapank. This name, actually, this bank doesn't really exist with this name anymore because 2005 it was bought by Swedbank, a Swedish bank. But what was interesting about Hansapank was that basically in 1990s it was basically a bank created from scratch in Estonia because it was kind of post-Soviet country with no real banking existing. So there were like young guys who were like, okay, how do we learn about best practices and how do we actually create the bank from the scratch? They were able to do it in 10 years, and this became the biggest bank in the Baltics. And they were also already at the end of 1990s, they started with internet banking. So my experience is that when I came to Japan 2001 first time, I already had been using internet banking for like many years. And I come here and it's like, okay, like I get the phone with a flip phone, right? So I open it, I can see TV from the phone like 21 years ago. And then I go to a bank and I get a paper-based bank book and plastic cash card. And I mean, in Estonia I already used internet banking for some time, but okay, Japan is not that advanced. But now, fast forward 21 years, it's still very often paper-based bank account and cash card, right? So it's Japan is not really changing that quickly. But yes, and then we had Skype. Actually, this is also a kind of Estonian success story. So we had basically they were bought by eBay, I think 2005. It was main founders were like Swede and Danish guy, but also Estonian engineers who became quite wealthy after the exit. So what it means that quite many people from Skype started their own companies because they already had experience what it means to create a successful startup. And Wise, actually one of the two founders of Wise, he's the first employee at Skype. So you can see this kind of progression in a sense that accumulated experience is transferring to the next companies. And today there are already quite many new companies in Estonia which are created former employees of Wise. Including Giga. I mean, like I'm not from Wise, but actually our app is built by former Wise engineers. The head of our customer support is actually a former Wiser, and one of the co-founders is a former Wiser. So we've been actually benefiting from their experience already quite a lot as well. But basically, in a small ecosystem, this kind of learning and kind of circulation of talent, that's actually quite important, and that's why those like 3% of GDP invested into startups is actually possible. Specifically, like actually how the Giga started was that there was a Pokopay, kind of like a banking service in Estonia. It's actually a neobank created by the last CEO of Hansa Bank. So in that sense, even like if you are CEO of the largest bank, it's kind of acceptable in Estonia to start a startup after that. And that guy, he started PocoPay. I think it started in 2016. And but it didn't really take off in Estonia because existing banks were already providing pretty good service digitally. So people, they did like the design, but they were a little bit like, okay, like it's not really giving me too much extra. So he changed his kind of business model, and instead of just servicing end users, he actually started to target businesses who want to set up new banks. So he basically started to provide software as a service, or a banking software as a service. So he was selling the code basically to different places. And for me, I actually had access to the code. And okay, like what could be the use case in Japan? That was a kind of question. And so you think about the use case, was that okay? Like as I said, like in Japan, retail banking does not actually make money for banks in general. So only like people who take loans, they make money for the banks. So basically, just managing accounts is loss making for any Japanese bank. And the least best served, or basically the most suffering people actually are foreigners, which being also a foreigner in Japan, I could actually feel by myself quite strongly as well. And of course, this that's a lunch hour in Japanese ATM, right? So I don't really know why Japanese ATMs close at night. Like what's happening, for example? I have no idea. But it's basically like coming back to this efficiency. There's actually a huge efficiency gap existing in Japanese banking. And it's quite clear that the companies cannot, retail banking cannot really be profitable, but mostly because they don't do things digitally. And when we talk about foreigners, then in reality, there are just two growth markets in Japan: old people and foreigners. And it's not on this slide, but basically by 2030, it's expected that more than 6 million people will leave labor market, basically retire. And this is actually demographics. It's already decided. Like Japanese government cannot change that. They can maybe ask old people to work longer. They can all maybe get more people join labor market. There are some ways to cope with that, but as a result, the number of foreigners needs to actually increase. And the Japanese government knows that. So right now, when you actually look at what discussions are going on, the Japanese government is basically, they are trying to change regulations to make it easier to come and live and work in Japan and stay for here longer. So in this sense, they are understanding it, and kind of government policy, maybe it's not perfect, but they're actually trying to move to the correct direction. But at the same time, if you go to the bank now as a foreigner, not speaking Japanese, like a random mega bank, what will happen would be that they would actually show you a small poster saying sorry, we cannot, if you don't speak Japanese, we cannot serve you. And Japanese banks actually actively want to avoid serving foreigners. That's actually the Japanese bank's honne. And the reason being is that, as I said, basically in retail banking, they are only able to make money when they give loans. But in reality, as a foreigner, foreigners are not to be trusted, and they will leave Japan anyway, and what happens if they don't pay money back? So it's very hard to actually be accepted to any loan in Japan as a foreigner. Even credit cards are difficult. So for Japanese banks, they actually, instead of trying to invest extra capabilities to be able to serve this actually small percentage of customers, they try to avoid doing that. And also, they in a way they are also correct, because there is extra risk involved with servicing foreigners, because they were saying buying and selling bank accounts. When I started talking about this idea with people who knew Japanese banking, they were saying that, selling and buying bank accounts is a big problem. I'm like, who does that? It's not really, it didn't really feel like a big thing. But then I went to one of the Facebook groups in the Vietnamese community. And yes, you can see as a picture here, basically it looked like industry. So many people were announcing that, okay, like if you have a bank account and in Japan, just like we will buy it, and or if you need one, we can also sell one to you. And we've done actually quite a lot of interviews later. So like one of the reasons, it's also used for kind of money laundering and kind of scam schemes, but there are also quite practical reasons sometimes why people buy those accounts, because the visa doesn't allow them to work enough. So they just to hide their incomes, they actually buy somebody else's bank account and get paid on that one. So, but it's not really possible to do it if you actually, the bank account is digital or in your phone. It's not that easy. But if it's just a paper-based bank book, selling it is just to sell that bank book, right? So in this sense, Japanese banks are, so their capability to do this kind of proper monitoring and AML is quite limited. So it's because, and they know that, and that's why they basically actively want to avoid getting this kind of customers. As a result, I think about 60% of foreigners in Japan, they have Japan Post Bank accounts. And I mean, Japan Post Bank, it's a bank, but it's also a post office. So in reality, like they are also not happy with the situation. From one side, they think that, okay, like we are kind of government owned, so it's kind of our duty to open bank accounts to anybody who wants. So they are doing, like they do open bank accounts. But they are troubled because if a foreigner comes and like takes up like one booth for like, I don't know, hour or 2 hours, how long does it take? There are people who want to buy stamps and want to send the parcel, and so it's basically they also troubled. So nowadays, after COVID, right now it's already, the capacity is quite jammed for them, and you have to take an appointment if you actually want to go and open a bank account. So it's not that simple. So so like when we look at kind of experience in Japanese bank, like for Japanese, I don't think that actually the Japanese banks are providing like great service for Japanese either, but people are kind of used with that, and they don't really know any better. And basically, so I think the basic internet banking is not too bad. So I think most people don't really feel that they have actually issues, like, or they're missing out when they about bank accounts. But when and also when we think about kind of new ways of working, kind of gig workers, people like that, getting account is not really an issue for them either. They can get that. But for foreigners, like foreign workers, they get basically from the beginning. So getting an account is a challenge. Actually operating their account is a challenge because at home most people use mobile banking already. They come to Japan, they get a paper-based bank book and a cash card. It's like, I have to make my transfers now at the ATM. It's partly in Japanese, it's confusing. So, but when it comes to trust, I mean, then also actually gig workers, like the people who don't work in large companies, they also lack trust, even if they could be Japanese. So they might get still credit cards, but with small limits. And from looking from bank's viewpoint, they actually troubled that nobody closes their accounts. So is it foreigner, or is it like Japanese? I mean, foreigners, of course, like I would have trauma in visiting a branch office. So leaving Japan, I wouldn't want to go to the office again just to close the account. I would just leave it. So I also have a couple of zombie accounts in Japanese banks. But overall, this foreigners not really being served in the same way. It's not really unique to Japan. It's a model that actually has been used in different countries as well. So like Moniz, this is a neobank in the UK. Interestingly, founded by an Estonian, basically. In the UK, the issue was that to actually rent an apartment, you needed to have a bank account. And to get a bank account, you need to just provide them your address. So it was kind of like if you didn't have one, you couldn't get the other. So Moniz made it possible to get a bank account online, just by downloading an app and doing the KYC. And that meant that people actually were able to also get rental agreements after that. And it became really viral in some of the kind of foreign communities, especially among Romanians for some reason. So, down there is basically the majority, which is a neobank in the US. It's also meant for migrants. And behind this is actually a company called Reptal, which is originally from Sweden. And one of my co-founders, the wise guy, he actually also worked in majority for some period. So we kind of, so I know, because Moniz was a Estonian company, then I know the investors who invested into that company, so I have information about how what went well for them, and also with majority, like my co-founder actually worked at that company. So we kind of use the model, how actually, what's the kind of, what we need to do to address this issue. And then looking in Japan, then, I mean, Japanese kind of new wave FinTechs, they're mostly doing prepaid cards. That's basically my impression. So quite a few of them. So like I think the Vandal card, P-San, and also Nudge, right? So interesting stuff, but it's they target kind of young, that generation, like Japanese. But it's, I'm not sure if they have been thinking about bank accounts, but maybe they just don't know how. Or it's like I will cover the regulation part a bit later, but it's actually not that easy to understand how to provide bank accounts. And then we talk about Wise. Wise is here providing foreign transfers, but in other countries they also provide bank accounts, borderless account from Singapore, for example. And Revolut, it's actually a bank in Europe already, and it was also like bank account was one of the main services they had. But in Japan, they're just a payment institution, so they are not able to do it as well. And at the same time, like we can see that kind of but they are not really focusing on foreigners; they're mostly focused on Japanese clients. Whereas when we look about foreigner focus, then Seven Bank has been doing some things. They started up with Sendi, which is a money transfer solution, and they also do bank accounts, but mostly for their own employees because there are quite many foreigners working for different 7-Elevens. And SBI Remit, it's also a transfer company, so they actually, it's not really launched yet, but in the coming months they are going to launch a kind of neobank, which is a little bit different model what we are doing, but still, basically it will be directed mostly towards trainees, basically people who are coming to Japan through the labor agencies. And yeah, well, Kia now me as well. And okay, let's see like short video.
This is Maria. Maria is moving to Japan for work, and she's excited to face new challenges. She loves anime and is crazy about Japanese cuisine. Exciting times ahead. One of the first things she needs to do in Japan is to set up her bank account so she can get paid for her work. Unexpectedly, this turns out to be very difficult. Banks close early at 3 p.m, so they're inconvenient to visit. If she doesn't speak Japanese, banks are reluctant to open an account for her. And even if she succeeds, she only gets a bank book and a plastic cash card. Internet banking is also limited, usually available only in Japanese. And no credit cards for foreigners. Maria supports her family back home, but sending money overseas is not cheap. Banking services in Japan are inconvenient and expensive. Giga has a solution for Maria and other foreigners coming to Japan. Maria just needs to download Giga app and start using it. She is able to open a real bank account in Japan from her mobile phone, the process taking less than 5 minutes, and it's done in her own language. Everyday banking services, bank accounts, payments, credit cards, and international money transfers are just the start. In the future, more various life services functions will be bundled into the Giga app, making it effectively Maria's personal control centre for everyday finances. Transaction history data will be collected, allowing her to build trust for her accessing credit and loan products. Maria will be able to elevate her life in Japan and enjoy her stay more fully. Finally, if Maria moves back to her home country, she'll be able to take her credit history with her and use it for elevating her life back home. Giga, banking in Japan made easy.
So basically we had a vision what needs to be done. We could actually see the kind of market need. And the question was, okay, like, can we actually, and we knew it can be done in other countries in different jurisdictions. And Japan is also, government has been trying to make regulation better in Japan. So there are, like every year, so something new is happening. And when we looked at it, then we could see that, okay, basically, in Japan today, if somebody's calling themselves neobank, it's actually like a large enterprise, like JAL Neobank or Yamato Denki Neobank, and or SBI remit, neobank will do the same. So they will be becoming kind of bank agency. So basically reseller of bank services, Kinko Allikivi, so like representing the bank. And this is quite heavy license. So the reason why startups have not been able to do it is because you actually need to be quite strongly controlled by the bank. You need quite a big compliance team already by that time, just to start. So it's not really accessible when you're just starting out. And in a way, you're also limited because you will be paid by the bank, and you are just position-wise reseller. So you can only sell whatever bank services there are. Whereas in Europe, this kind of e-money license, or also the logic in the US when basically neobanks are connecting with local banks, it's more about that, closer to this electronic payment settlement operator license in Japan. It's a Tenshi Gesai Totai Tokyo. So, which is quite a relatively new license in Japan, and it was created mostly because to have a regulation for companies such as Money Tree, or Money Forward, or like Free and so on, because the idea was that before end user gave their login credentials to those companies, and they were going to screen scraping data from accounts, but this made it basically legal to access through APIs. And the assumption was that it's basically providing access to already existing account through APIs. But so when we started discussing with kind of people who were able to give some legal advice, but also with banks, that that we actually want to start opening accounts for foreigners, then 9 people out of 10 would say that, okay, you need to get the bank agency license. You cannot really do it with another one. Because, but at the same time, because basically regulation did not say anything about creating accounts, but it also didn't say it's not possible. So, so basically, our assumption was that okay, we are able to do it, but we need to actually have a Japanese bank who agrees with us to do it. And so basically, that's not really it's regulation. It's not against it, but we have to actually get agreement from the bank. So it's basically the bank's decision if they want to do it with us or not. And we started talking with different Japanese banks. Fast forward, we actually got the license on this model like last October, so it's actually possible. But we are actually the really first one in Japan using this kind of license to actually open accounts, do like bank transactions. Not only connect and get the data, but we also actually do the whole thing. And but yeah, so basically it was kind of a big risk also from the investor side that okay, like you're saying that you can use this license. Are you sure? Like we're like, yeah, we got a couple of legal opinions that it can be done. But now, yeah, after we actually got the license, the story was quite different. But basically, for us, we kind of started talking with different banks. My co-founder Yoshi, he actually thought that maybe like MUSG, who used to work there, he could actually do it in a big bank first. But actually, big banks are not really the ones who want to do, who want to be the first in doing anything. So we actually found an introduction to the top of Kiraboshi Financial Group. And Kiraboshi Group, they are a regional bank in Tokyo. Tokyo is a place in Japan with the biggest number of foreigners. So they already had many foreigners as their clients. And their own strategy was that they actually wanted to remove, like basically transfer retail into a digital. So since about a year ago, there is UI Bank, which was part of the group. They basically launched that bank. And we started talking with them actually even before. So the UI Bank was still kind of in preparation. And the vision was that yes, they want to basically onboard their clients digitally to the digital bank, but they also were really interested about developing banking as a service offering as well. And basically, maybe we approached them in the right time, but we got the commitment to be one of their first pilot projects in banking as a service offering. But of course, the understanding in Japan as a banking as a service is a little bit limited to giving access to the already existing account, not really like creating new accounts like we were planning to do. So for us, like we were explaining to them the model, how it works in Europe, and we actually even ended up taking the bank delegation to a FinTech study tour in Europe last summer. So we took them to London, to Copenhagen, to Tallinn, Estonia, and also to Helsinki, basically to show them companies like Monese. So we actually took them to Monese to show, okay, this is a company, like we want to be like them. And then we took them to an Estonian bank, which is actually doing this banking as a service in a way what we needed them to do. So Estonian bank, it's called like LHV. They have a UK branch. They have 10 million accounts opened, but they don't serve anybody directly. So basically, the 10 million accounts are opened through 200 FinTechs. So basically, it's a very unique kind of banking model, but just doing only banking as a service. So basically, so we took UI Bank guys to visit them and tell them, okay, that's a model. What we want you to do. Just ask questions, how it's possible to do it. But so in this sense, to get the commitment, it took some time, and it took even more time to get them kind of moving. But by the end of last summer, we were actually at the position where we had daily meetings about just to go over like all the kind of progress and all the questions what needed to be kind of ironed out. So it was not easy. It took like several months before we were able to basically reach the kind of common understanding, because all the bank sides, they had to change their own regulations just to be able to do what we wanted them to do. So, but yeah, it was possible. And yeah, so basically, like where we came with Kina is right now, so the business model itself, it's very similar to what our kind of like reference models in Europe or in the US are doing. So it's subscription model. So we charge like 1,000 yen plus tax, so 1,100 yen. But when we go, I think it's actually not a bad deal, because I mean, it's very difficult to say exactly what the costs would be in a different bank. But I mean, ATM fees can be quite hefty, and every time when I make a domestic transfer, I have to pay like 440 yen for one transfer. And I'm like, okay, I was overspending for sure. So in this sense, even if people don't really, in general, don't do that many domestic transfers, it will not be like 1,000 yen extra, but it will be like maybe some 100 yen extra for what you would pay anyway. So, but added convenience, like no visits to ATMs, and basically you can do everything like from your phone. And but yeah, so basically, but still for us right now we are launching, so it will be still we still need to prove that actually people are finding enough value in the service to pay this actually every month. But it's basically that's kind of similar amount what people in the UK are paying for a very similar service. So basically where we are today is I'm going to think we are actually a real neobank, because we are not large corporation. It's a startup, and it's 100% mobile, digital onboarding. Everything is done by eKYC. We are using actually also different AML providers, doing this name checks, also transaction monitoring. So its service itself actually feels very simple, but there is quite a lot of complicated stuff behind it. And what we've done at the moment, it's basically MVP. It's just bank account, domestic transfers, and a cash card. So you can use ATM and put money in and get money out. We actually want to get rid of the cash card. But so this year we have to do payment cards. Right now, basically, a couple of last options on the table, which one we'll choose. But basically, we will start also issuing cards you can actually pay at the store or pay on the internet. And we want to integrate international remittance. What I'm saying is that we don't really want to do it by ourselves, but we also collaborate with international remittance providers such as Wise or some other local provider in Japan, and our users will be able to initiate international remittance in the app. So that's actually something that we would not be able to do as a bank agency, because if you have this bank agency license, you're limited with banking services. In our case, because we are in essence representing the end user, and the end user is giving us authorization to open a bank account for them, to do bank transactions for them. So we are actually free to offer them different services, and also access to those ones. So basically we can offer access to international remittance. but also if you wanted to, we could offer them SIM cards or like any e-commerce products. So we are actually not limited even to financial products. So in this sense, this license is quite flexible and giving us more opportunities compared with alternative ones. So like basically we start with the banking, daily banking, but probably not this year yet, but we actually want to start helping people to build the credit scores as well. So we could start giving some actually credit cards or overdrafts, like basically next level financial services, which otherwise you would not be able to access in Japan. So that's where we want to reach as quickly as possible. And yeah, basically, who do we see as our customers? We actually launching the app in English, Japanese, and Vietnamese. We will add more languages because when we look like from what country most people are coming to Japan, and also like which what people are most kind of having difficulties with accessing financial services, then those actually are those like people coming to Japan from Southeast Asia mostly. It's not here, but in reality, most likely the next language what we'll cover will be actually Indonesian, because this is we see quite a big trend of kind of more Indonesians coming to Japan compared with before. But the ambition is not really, I mean, foreigner community for us is kind of the main first focus. So in the future, once we're actually able to start addressing this credit building problem, then it will be, I believe it will be actually attractive also for Japanese gig workers and Japanese part-time employees, because this is not really, they are not the people who would be recognized by existing legacy banks as worthy customers. But for us, I mean, we actually look at every person separately based on the data they have. So we would be able to provide them better services. So yeah, basically like what for us, like one of the big milestones was last November. So we were able to, we actually signed the contract with UI Bank and kind of announced that we will start developing this API connection. So in reality, it took a little bit longer than we thought. We were hoping that we can actually launch the service already last year. In reality, we did open 10 test accounts last year, but this year, yeah, basically this February, now we have been running closed beta, and most likely next week we actually going to announce that we actually service will be available for anybody. In reality, like it's still in the beginning, it's kind of limited to Android users, and there are like also weird things like we cannot really onboard student visa holders at the moment, and we cannot also onboard the US citizens at the moment because they need to do tax reporting, which UI Bank is not compliant with. So it's kind of not our issue, but our partner bank's issue, basically. But those are the things that we are like planning to solve as well. And yeah, we also raised we announced that we raised some seed round, pre-seed round, like 1.9 million euros, which is quite a decent one, mostly from Japanese investors. So yeah, so like last year, what we did, like we built the app, raised the seed round, got licensed, signed the contract with UI Bank, and opened 10 test accounts. And this year, like yeah, private beta has been launched. We need to add payment cards, international remittance, upgrade the API connection with the bank. This is actually important because Norbert, when you opened the account today, you send the message, oh, it's done manually. So yes, so basically what UI Bank, one of the reasons why actually we went with them was that in Japan, no bank actually had this kind of APIs what we needed. But UI Bank, their advantage was that they actually didn't have all the APIs built out yet. So we were able to give them input, what is actually needed. And in the meanwhile, while they are basically building it, they said, okay, like they will do some operations manually. So at the moment, in reality, how it happens is that from our end, everything is digital. But once, for example, when it is onboarding, you go through the onboarding flow, and then in the backend, we create actually a CSV file, which we pass over to UI Bank in a secure environment, and they will basically create the account manually. All same with transactions. So like when you actually send money, it's not in real time yet. There's some time lag because their operators have to download the file and basically makes the transactions to happen. But I think quite soon, like not as soon as we maybe would like to, but basically I know that they're also working with Next APIs, and we have been able to give our own input to them, like what we actually need. So in this sense, I think it's a good way to start manually, basically test things out, and to get them also convinced that this actually works. And and reach main scalability actually later this year. So in the beginning, like those accounts will still be quite a limited resource what we have. So like yeah. But if we actually are able to do this, then the main goal is like 40,000 customers at the end of the year. But it really depends on if you are getting to scalability or not, because otherwise we will be like maximum capacity now would be maybe 1,000 users a month. So once like from next month. So it will still take time until we are able to build it up. And yes, so we need to kind of do a bit more fundraising. But for you guys, like special offer. Okay, there's 3 conditions. Like you need to have an Android phone. iOS will come out later. And not in Japan on student visa, and not having US citizenship. Then you can also join like a private beta. And just the only thing you need to do is just send me your Google Play Store user email, so we will put you into early access list and send the invite code. So it's next week it will be basically what will happen is that it will be possible to sign up for invite code online, but it will still be invite code based because of we need to have control the flow in the beginning. But yeah, so I'm really excited to hear your questions.